As you probably suspect, I'm Zig Ziglar. Now, before we invite the live audience to participate in this presentation, I'd like to share some thoughts that are critical to your success in closing the sale. Number one, selling is a transference of feeling. If I can make you feel about my product like I feel about my product, if there's any way on earth you are going to buy my product. Now, Willie Dorsey, the great spiritual singer, puts it this way: brother, if you're going to be convincing, then you've got to be convinced. In other words, you transfer that feeling to others that your product, goods, or services are good. Now, there's a myth that's an absolute fallacy, and that is that a good salesperson can sell anybody anything. That's a con artist. A good salesperson, a professional, one who wants to build a career instead of just making a sale, clearly understands that you've got to have a conviction that what you're selling is in the best interest of that person who's buying. That way you render a service. That's what selling really is all about. Second point I'd like to make is simply this: prospects don't change their mind. Now, I know what many of you are thinking, but in reality, they make a new decision based on the new information which you give them. That's the reason the professional salesperson has a storehouse of additional information, because when the prospect says no, they're really saying no based on what they K-N-O-W. Now, you let them know more, and good closing involves education, then they're going to be knowing more and consequently buying more. Number three, the kind of person you are is critically important. A Harvard study recently reveals this: that the people who gain the most usable information from a presentation such as this one take good notes. That's number one. And number two, when it's over, they get with an associate or their boss or their trainer or their manager, and they brainstorm. So as you watch and listen, ask yourself these questions: how can I adapt and use this material old Zig's sharing with me in my career so that I can sell more today and be able to sell more tomorrow to the same people? Now, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's go to that live audience. Totally convinced that our major need in America today is leadership in the home. My goodness. Thank you very much. Okay. Sometimes when people stand up on me before I get started, I'm afraid they're about to leave me, so I'm glad to see you sit down. Now, I'm going to be asking questions as we go along. The first three closes involve selling you on what you do. Now, selling, and so I call this one the persuasion close. As I ask you these questions, some of them are kind of simple, but please do me a favor and respond to them. How many of you sell a pretty good product? Can I see your hands, please? All right. How many of you sell a extraordinarily good product? Can I see your hand? How many of you, ladies and gentlemen, sell a product that serves or solves a problem? Can I see your hand? How many of you believe that when you sell a product that solves a problem, you deserve a profit? How many of you believe that to sell two products that solve two problems, you deserve two profits? Can I see your hand? Okay. In other words, you believe that when you render a service, you deserve to be paid for it. Is that what you're saying? And what you're saying is, the more people I help, the more problems I solve, the more profit I deserve. Isn't that really what you're saying there? Okay, now I don't want to put words in your mouth because that's not sanitary. But that really is what you're selling or saying, all right? Now, how many of you have been selling for as long as a year? Can I see your hand? All right. How many of you still got all of the money that you've earned in the last 12 months? Can I see your hands? Okay? Let me ask you a question. How many of you got clients or customers whom you sold a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago that are still using and enjoying the benefits of what you sold to them all those years ago? Can I see your hand? Now, the next question is the critical one. How many of you believe that the customer was the biggest winner in the transaction? All right, then if that is the case, is the sales process something you do to somebody, or is it something you do for somebody? Now, when you understand that, you're in position to begin to close the sale. Now, let me tell you what I just did. I just did something that is extremely important in selling. A lot of times we convince people that our product, goods, or services are the best, but we don't persuade them to take action. How do you persuade? Well, let's go back in history and look at a couple of gentlemen named Aristotle and Galileo. Aristotle was a brilliant man, but he came up with a very foolish concept. He believed that if you drop two weights of different sizes but made out of the same material, that they would fall at different rates of speed. That's what they taught at the University of Pisa for years and years and years. And then a young whippersnapper named Galileo came along, and he said, that's crazy. The students and professors said, why, you're off your rocker. Why, Aristotle said, and he said, well, let's go to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and let's take a look and see. He took two different sized objects of the same material, he dropped them, and they obviously fell at exactly the same rate of speed. He had convinced them beyond any doubt that what he was saying was absolutely right. But he did not persuade them to take action. Now, what am I getting at? How do you persuade people? You don't persuade people by telling them. You persuade them by asking them. You see, had I started by saying that you as salespeople really render a service, you would say, yeah, but I do okay too. Hey, you do all right, and that's fine. That's part of the equation. That's the reason I went through that little routine about how many of you sell a pretty good product. That is so important. You see, that sales process is something you do for someone. It is not something you do to someone. So I'd like to tie that in selling you on you to another attitude close, because you're the most important part of this equation. For a couple of years, I fought in the ring. One of the things and incidentally, I had a pretty good record. As a matter of fact, the worst I ever finished was second. Now, the only reason I quit was because of my hands. The referee kept stepping on them. Well, anyhow, in athletics, what you do is you study the opponent's weakness and exploit it. That's true in football, basketball, boxing, tennis, whatever it is. You study their weakness and exploit it. In selling, you study their weakness, that is their need, and you strengthen it by selling them your goods or products or services. There is your difference right there. Now, what kind of person sells the most? What is involved philosophically in this? We've built our entire business on the concept that you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. You solve their problems, my friends, you're going to do all right. Now, please understand that's a philosophy and not a tactic. Where does character and integrity enter the picture? The Forum Corporation out of Boston, Massachusetts, did an exhaustive study on 341 salespeople. 173 of them were super successful. 161 of them, 173 were super successful. 168 of them were moderately successful, and they determined what made the difference. Now, all factors were equal in the two groups as far as experience and education and product and territory and all those things. But there were two major differences and reasons for their success. The first one was trust. You see, the reality is without integrity, people won't listen. Without trust, they won't follow, meaning they will not buy. Now, the question is, who do they trust? Now, this is so simple, it's going to be frightening. They trust the good guys and the good girls. They trust those people of character and integrity. The second major difference they discovered was this. The super successful salespeople, the career salespeople, clearly understand that the sale is not complete until the order is signed, the merchandise is delivered and paid for, and the customer is happy with it. In order for those things to happen, you have to have a team of support people, and most professional salespeople do not have a team. So when they call the office, they're just as courteous to the switchboard operator as they are the chairman of the board. They're just as nice to the file clerk and shipping clerk and collection lady or person as they are to any of the executives in the company. And they become a team, and everybody understands then that they're involved in the sales process. Now let's look at what I call the three-question close to kind of begin to tie some of these together. Let's assume in this close that you've demonstrated your product. And let's assume that you have demonstrated that it will save money. And so the three questions simply, can you see where using this product or service would save you money? Question number two, are you interested in saving money? And question number three, when do you think you ought to start saving the money? Now, exactly the same question will go with time and work and health. Can you see where this would be good for your health? Are you interested in taking care of your health? If you were ever going to start taking care of your health, when do you think would be the best time to start? That's the immediacy, having them into action right now. Let me give you a specific example of how that works. Don Gerald from Garden Grove, California, represents a very fine, accredited vocational college. A man and his three daughters came in to consider enrolling in the college. The enrollment fee was roughly $16,000. Now, that's a pretty nice little piece of change. But Don had already determined that the man could well afford it, so he knew that price was not the problem. But he knew in order to persuade him to take action, he had to ask him questions that would lead him to the decision table, not run him or force him at the decision table. So we asked him very simply, do you invest in the stock market? The man said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. Then he said, do you consider the funds needed to put your daughters through school an investment or an expenditure? Now, I want you to notice he's tying the head and the heart together. Now, let me emphasize a point. People do make emotional decisions, but if you got some logic behind it, your chances of getting the sale are dramatically higher. Well, the man obviously said, well, I consider it an investment. Then very quietly, Don Gerald said, and how much are your daughters worth as an investment? Now, what I'm encouraging you to do is to think in terms of adapting these and other questions to fit your product, goods, or services. Now, we look at the alternative choice close here, and you will see that one will come up a number of times under several different circumstances. But let me encourage you, always think in terms, as I make a presentation or give you a close, think in terms of how can I use this, adapt it, adjust it to fit my particular goods, products, or services? How can I use this to fit my situation? That's the reason that brainstorming and thinking it through is going to be so enormously important. First time I heard of alternative choice was old Elmer Wheeler many, many years ago. He was the man who said, sell the sizzle and not the steak. Well, the Walgreens Drug Company, back during the Depression, hired him to help boost their sales. Now, in those days, the drugstore part of it, the soda fountain, was an enormously effective tool for bringing people in, and it was a great profit center. Well, in those days, before we had cholesterol, isn't it astonishing in our country today, the land of milk and honey, all we talk about is calories and cholesterol. But anyhow, Wheeler, they used to sell eggs and put them in the milkshakes, in the malted milks and all. Well, in those days, you could buy a dozen eggs for 15 cents. When they put an egg in the shake, they charged them a nickel for it. So instead of asking them if they wanted an egg in it, Wheeler taught them to pick up 2 eggs and simply when they ordered a milkshake or malted milk, say, did you want 1 egg or 2? There was a dramatic increase, an explosion of business as a direct result of it. Alternative choice can be used in many ways. Did you want to handle this by check, or do you prefer to pay cash? Do you want to use a credit card, or do you want to put it on our budget system? Now, as you look at these, I'm going to go through a series of questions. Some are alternative choice clauses. Some of them are just question clauses, and some are the assumptive clause. But notice some of these. If this were the only feature this machine had, it would be well worth owning, wouldn't it? Closing. When we install this equipment, would you like for me to demonstrate the major features again? Assuming. Would you like for me to mark this one sold while we check on the most agreeable terms to finance it for you? Now that injects just a slight amount of fear. What you're implying is it might be gone. And I'll say this several times, but the fear of loss is greater than the desire for gain. Don't take anything away from me. That's the reason in stores where they measure out food, we always teach them, put too small an amount on there first so you can add to it. Nobody wants to see things taken away from them. That's selling, all right? Another clause, do you need to consult with anyone else before you place the order? Is the purchase order issued from this department? Would you like to have your own bank finance this, or would you like for us to work out the financial arrangements? Since the item is in short supply, would you be willing to wait for 3 weeks for delivery? Would you want to make a large deposit so the monthly deposits are smaller, or would you prefer a minimum deposit and slightly larger monthly deposits? Would you prefer this in green, or does the red appeal to you most? Again, I challenge you, use your imagination. Think of your products and services, and in your quiet thinking time, think it through. And as you brainstorm, come up with other questions. Shall we ship it by motor freight or air express? Do you want this lot registered in your name or your wife's name? Do you prefer the lot on the golf course, or does the one on the lake appeal to you most? If you saw that it was to your advantage to own this product and the terms we work out are satisfactory, would you have any objection to going ahead today? Can you see the financial advantage to reducing the use of those powerful overhead lights which provide unneeded light in some areas in favor of using point-of-impact lighting during certain times of the day? Do you believe it's wise to invest in solidly constructing equipment which will give you long, trouble-free operation for the lifetime of the product? Now, those are questions that can be asked. But let me say it again. People do not change their mind. They do make new decisions. I asked that redhead of mine. Now, my wife is a decided redhead, meaning one day she just decided that she is going to be a redhead. By her preference, when I talk about her, I always call her the redhead. When I talk to her, it's Sugar Baby, and her name is Jean. I asked her to marry me, and she said no. I asked her the second time, no. Third time, no. Fourth time, no. Fifth time, no. Sixth time, she said yes. But she never changed her mind. What she did was make a new decision. Now, psychologically, you as salespeople need to understand that. When a person says no, and you just sit on them and say, oh, you know you like it, go ahead, you're just irritating them because they've already decided no, and they're not going to change their mind. Now, if you give them new information, which enables them to make a new decision, you see, a wise person changes his mind, and I think